Okay. Who knows who Charles Colson is? Okay, look at how many hands with, this. I was just identifying the old people. I heard that. Somebody said you were sleeping against the pillar downstairs.
I was nodding off.
For those of you younger people or people that haven't read history, back in 1972, I guess it was, or 3, a group of Richard Nixon's hatchet men broke into the Watergate Hotel, into the office of the Democratic National Committee, and stole some stuff. Richard Nixon was known as Dirty Dick. He was full of dirty tricks. And so they all got together and they decided, the people that did this all got together and they decided on a story that they were going to tell. And that didn't work out too well. Within a short time, they all got arrested. And Colson, who was one of the main perpetrators in the crime, went to prison. And while he was in prison, somebody told him about Jesus. And to make a long story short, he came to believe in Jesus because he saw that all the people who were there at the resurrection, none of them denied what they saw. And he said that, in his case, a whole bunch of people getting together and concocting a story, it fell apart right away because people told different stories and they found out that Nixon himself was involved. And so as a result, Nixon had to step down as president of the United States, and Gerald Ford became our president, and the first and only president ever was non-elected, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but sometimes people in politics are dishonest, and the vice president under Nixon had been arrested, or not arrested, but he'd been found, he did something wrong and he had to resign, and Gerald Ford became the vice president. And so when Nixon had to resign, Gerald Ford became president. Nobody ever elected him. The point I'm trying to make is that Colson looked at the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus, and he looked at the facts, and he determined that since none of them would deny and would even go to their deaths claiming that Jesus was alive, that was absolute proof that it occurred. And Colson he started a group called Prison Fellowship, and after he got out of prison, and he wrote some books and spread the gospel, and was interested in working with mainly federal prisoners. So we're in this passage where Jesus has been risen from the dead, and he's been dead for 3 days and 3 nights, and the situation was such that the women, they gave the dirty job to the women to go and prepare his body for burial, and the women came to the grave in the morning, and they had their spices and all the things that they were going to do to prepare his body for a proper burial, and he wasn't there. And 2 angels showed up. It says 2 men showed up in dazzling clothes, and they said, "Why are you looking for a living guy in a cemetery? Why are you looking for the living among the dead?" And they said to the women, "He's not here, he's resurrected. Don't you remember he told you this when you were on your way?" Jesus told them, I think at least 3 times, from the beginning of his trip from Galilee down the Jordan and into Jerusalem, that he was going to go to Jerusalem to be condemned and to rise again on the 3rd day. And so the angel said to the women, "Don't you remember he taught you this?" Well, they must have been there. The women aren't really mentioned too much in the gospel story, although they are there, and they are said to be mainly the people who provided the cash for the ministry. And so they were the first ones. They didn't actually see Jesus, but they saw the angels who told them that Jesus was resurrected. And so that's where we are in the story here. And it says in Luke chapter 24, are we there? Yeah, good. Peter got up and ran to the tomb, and stooping and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves. Now, people said he wasn't really resurrected. His disciples came and stole the body. That's why he wasn't there. Well, there was a problem with that because it says clearly that Pilate put guards on they rolled a stone in front of the grave, and he put guards to make sure that nobody could come and steal the body, because Jesus had publicly said, in 3 days I will rise again. So Pilate said, you two guards go there and you make sure that nobody comes and steals the body. Well, when the angels showed up, the guard got scared and ran away. And when Peter got there, it says he saw the linen clothes. Well, what kind of clothes did Jesus have on? We know that he had Herod's garment on when he was crucified, and we also know that they pulled the clothes off of him and he was crucified naked, and they cast lots to see who would get that royal garment. And then when Joseph of Arimathea had come and taken the body off of the cross, and he bought a linen garment and wrapped Jesus in the linen garment and took him and placed him into this tomb that nobody had ever been laid in before. Now, suppose you're a grave robber. I know this might not be too hard for some of you. Just kidding, of course. Suppose you're a grave robber and you come in to get the body of Jesus, and he's been beaten bloody, and he's been hanging on a cross for 3 hours at a minimum, and he has flog marks on his back and blood, and he's cut open, and his side has been pierced with a sword. Are you going to leave the wrapping? You think you're going to leave it there? You're going to take him naked?
Oh, no, I leave it.
You're going to leave it on him, because you're not going to take a beaten, rotten corpse. You're going to leave it on. But it was there, and it doesn't say anything about it being bloody. He looks in, the body isn't there, but the cloth is still there. Now, I suppose this was written later. They didn't write this down that afternoon. And when they were thinking back, what did you see, Peter? What did you see? Well, I saw the cloth was still there. And it says, then he went home, amazed at what happened. Now, this puzzled me, because we know that he didn't go home. His home was on the Sea of Galilee. So I looked up the word, and I found that in almost every English translation, except for the New King James Version, it says he went home. But the New King James Version translates a Greek word that means he went to himself. It's only used 2 times when the word home is used 70 sometimes in the Bible. So it's a very special word, and it doesn't mean home. Now, why the translators translate it home is because the King James translated it home, and then when they looked at that, when they translated the New American Version and the New American Standard and the New King James Version, they looked at it and said, that word doesn't mean home. It means he thought to himself. He was there alone. And so he went away to be with himself, to think about this. So if you wonder, to me it was like, whoa, how could he possibly go home? It means of himself, themself, or them, and it comes from a root word that means he, she, or them, pronouns. The two pronouns, he and she. That's the original root word. So he sees what's going on. He sees the tomb is empty, and he doesn't quite believe what the women told him. You know, women had a rough lot in those days. They wouldn't let them be educated, and they wouldn't let them testify in court. And so when the women all showed up and said he's alive, they didn't quite believe it. You know, one thing about Christianity is you got to doubt it. You have to doubt it. You know, God gave us a doubter. It's inherent in human beings, the doubter is there. But we're not supposed to doubt God. We're supposed to doubt when the devil says, you're not going to die if you eat that. You're supposed to doubt the devil. You're supposed to doubt things that are wrong, things that are tempting you to do the wrong thing. You're not supposed to doubt God, but we do, and God forgives us for doubting him. Peter was, in this case, a doubter. Now, Peter is the one who was walking with Jesus on the road to Caesarea Philippi previously, and he said to the disciples, who do people say that I am? Some say you're John the Baptist resurrected. Some say you're Elijah the prophet, or one of the old prophets. And Jesus said to Peter, who do you say that I am? And Peter said, you are the Son of the living God. When Jesus was doing his miracles and all of the teachings that he was giving, Peter understood that he was the Messiah and that he was the Son of God. But now, Jesus has been crucified, and so he has his doubts. How can somebody be resurrected from the dead? And so he went away amazed, thinking to himself. Now, on that same day, next slide please, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. Now, people want to assign names to these two people, and we know one name, which I'll mention in a little bit, but some people want to say, well, you know, maybe this was Luke himself. Some people have speculated that Luke wrote this story, and this is where Luke enters into the narrative, and he didn't want to add his own name in there, and so he just said, you know, somebody. I find that highly unlikely because Luke doesn't appear. Luke as a person does not appear until the middle of the book of Acts. So I reject that idea. And some people say, well, it's Peter because the story goes a verse, you know, the verse previously talks about Peter, and then this verse talks about two people, but it doesn't mention Peter. Well, why wouldn't it mention Peter in the context? And he went on the road to Emmaus later that afternoon, that type of thing. Why wouldn't it say that? Well, who were these people? Well, we don't know. But we do know who one of them was. And we don't know where Emmaus was. But it says about 7 miles in this translation. If you read the amount of stadia that it was about 7.5 miles actually. So you could put a compass in the middle of Jerusalem and open it up and draw